And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another exciting Australian Indian Radio's Facebook Daily Live Updates. And today we have got quite a bit to get through as well, as usual. And sometimes we do tend to run out of time as well. So let's take a very quick look at what the weather's doing for today, for the rest of Thursday. And for the rest of Thursday, the maximum is going to be 22 degrees. It's going to be a sunny day. Chance of rain is 0% zills. Yes. And the Brisbane area, we're going to have light winds, and it's going to be sunny conditions. Fire danger is low to moderate, and sun protection is recommended from now till about 1:20 p.m. And UV index is predicted to be, around 4, which is moderate, which is quite. It's been quite consistent at that lately, and that is wonderful, and it is very good to see. Now, looking at the coronavirus cases worldwide, 7,492 cases, and recovery so far 6,915, and the death stands at 102, and I've told that might now be 103 as that case happened in Victoria. It hasn't come up or been updated on our screen as yet, but I'm pretty sure that's the number at the moment. Worldwide, we have, at the time of reporting, it was 9.3 million. But as we go into the news, we look at how we are very close to the 10 million mark. That's a lot of people. Recoveries worldwide is 4.6 million, and the death toll still remains at about 479,000. So as I mentioned before that, when you look at all these cases, the global cases at this point in time, it looks like that the figures there would be very close to 10,000. So World Health Organization Director General Tedros says he expects the number of coronavirus cases around the world, now at 9.3 as I reported, will reach about 10 million next week. Mr. Tedros said that he backed Saudi Arabia's decision to ban pilgrims from abroad to attend the annual Hajj pilgrimage to help limit the spread of virus. So as we know, there has been an annual event, but this year only the locals will be allowed to go under strict control measures as well. He said World Health Organization is now supporting many countries in dealing with difficulties in obtaining oxygen concentrators device that boost the flow of oxygen to support the breathing of COVID-19 sufferers. The demand is outstripping supply, as he has said. And that Mike Ryan has also said that the pandemic in many countries and in Americas had not yet peaked and is still intense, especially in Central and South America. So what does it mean, when you look at the many countries that have experienced about 25 to 50% increase in the cases in the last week, he said. So are we jumping in this too soon? Are we really, easing the restrictions too soon? What do you think? So what's going to happen worldwide? Let's take a very quick look. But I think before we go to that, let's look at Queensland. As we know, we said 1 week with no new COVID-19 case in Queensland, which is very good news. And with that, our Premier has been, as we've seen for the last couple of days, he's been travelling outback and going into the regional areas and making announcements from there. So 1 week with no new COVID-19 cases in Queensland. Well done, Queensland. Let's hear from our Premier.
We'll be providing an extra $5 million to continue the cluster fencing program out here in Western Queensland. This is something that people have been raising with me. We've listened, and we will continue to deliver. In fact, it was just over 5 years ago that Grazier sat down with me outside Charleville and Longreach and talked to me about ways in which we could assist by putting in place cluster fencing to keep out the wild dogs and to bring back the sheep industry in Queensland. After an investment of $20 million and 7,000 kilometres of wild dog fencing, the cluster fencing that's been put in place, the sheep industry is back and the lambs are back. It means jobs. I think it's a very key investment because what we've seen over the past 5 years is a complete turnaround in the sheep industry in this state.
When you consider what the $5 million will add to our previous investments of $19.7 million, it clearly demonstrates the commitment the Palaszczuk government has, not only in the revitalisation of the sheep industry, but also western rural communities such as Barkhall and here. This is a real game changer we're announcing here today, and I'm proud to be part of a Palaszczuk government that it's delivering for Western Queensland.
And that was our friend Mark Fenner there with the Premier, and it is wonderful to see all the good work that he also does out there. It is very, very encouraging. You know, those cluster fences were long due out in the outback for our sheep industry, and you know, the announcement that Queensland government is going to put some funding towards that is a very, very welcome news. Right now, moving on with the world news, let's look at what's happening worldwide. The cases that have reintroduced the quarantine after the cases of tennis mishap. So Croatia is on to the top of that, and India is calling for armed forces to help. We will look at all of those in great details as a breaking news that has just come through is about Victoria. And as we know, in Victoria, the cases that have been reported, the case that makes our national numbers go up to 103, and the military, not only in Delhi, as we will look at in a minute, that Victoria has called for the military to come and assist them as well. Let's take a very quick look.
Victoria's COVID crisis has lurched from bad to worse on a day of major developments. A man in his 80s became our 20th victim as the Premier enlisted the Defence Force to help tackle a worrying surge in cases. Flying squads door-knocked residents in hotspot suburbs in Melbourne's north and southeast, and supermarkets were forced to reintroduce purchasing limits following a fresh wave of panic buying. Brett McLeod begins our coverage.
A grim reminder that the worst of this virus isn't past.
Sadly, a man in his 80s has died overnight of infection.
It's the first coronavirus death anywhere in the country for about a month.
This is a critical juncture.
The man's death takes the national toll to 103. 20 new coronavirus cases in Victoria have been detected, 7 from known outbreaks, 1 from hotel quarantine, 9 from routine testing. 3 staff at a Maidstone dental clinic have tested positive, while the number linked to H&M at Northland has risen to 5. Perhaps the most concerning number, that's the R, or reproduction number, which shows the rate of transmission. The aim is to have it below 1. It's currently at 2.5, the highest since March.
I expect that will go back down, and I absolutely hope that we can get it below 1 and drive those numbers back down to 0.
We're here to talk to you about the coronavirus.
Today, the areas designated as hotspots were targeted by a door-knocking army.
We're now in a hotspot, what that means for us and what extra precautions we might need to take.
State and federal governments deny not enough was done earlier to keep ethnic communities informed.
All of the messages have been translated, I think, into 53 languages thereabouts. So they've been quite active in engaging with multicultural communities.
But there are concerns about misinformation on social media.
There are people who use social media from their country of origin or amongst their network of friends as their primary source of information. A lot of that is false information. A lot of it tells them that it's all rubbish, the messaging from government.
Also today, an indication there may be a sea change when it comes to advice on wearing of masks in public. We've been told all along it's simply not necessary, but Victoria's health chief says he's rethinking that advice.
If you're going into a marketplace, if you're going into a busy shopping centre and you haven't got an alternative time that you can go, if you know that people are coming within 1.5 metres, then a mask might be appropriate, but that's being worked up.
Leaving Victorians potentially facing a new direction. Brett McLeod, 9 News.
The Defence Force has been recruited to tackle Victoria's coronavirus outbreak. State political reporter Andrew Lund is following today's developments. Andrew, what will they help with?
Well, Pete, the Premier's asked for just over 300 Defence Force personnel to ramp up coronavirus testing and community education and to help with hotel quarantine operations in a similar vein to what we've seen in New South Wales and Tasmania over recent months. The federal government says ADF personnel are already on the ground and working to organise that support here in Victoria. On top of that, the Andrews government has asked the other states for help, and New South Wales, Queensland, South Australia and Tasmania will provide an extra 200 healthcare workers in an effort to try to stop that second wave. The interstate rivalries have been put aside and the message is back to us all being in this together.
We don't want a second wave, so let's all help Victoria and help to get it under control. I think in this...
And that is picking up on the news that we have already shown out there. So it is wonderful to see that the measures are being put in place. We've heard from our Premier and our Prime Minister. Well, he is on a bit of a campaign trail at the moment, but let's hear from him as well as he hits some of the electorates which the support of which is very much needed for him.
Fiona Cotfoy's Liberal candidate for Eden Monaro is no stranger to Maribyrnong Airport, so she, like everyone else who uses this airport very regularly, when things are back in full operations, we're pleased that $4.5 million is going to extend the runway here and the taxiways and the general aviation infrastructure, a very important investment for Maribyrnong and for the South Coast. On top of that, there's about $150,000 also going into the Tumut Airport on taxiways and projects of that nature. It's all part of our regional airports program. You know how much this difference this make to this local community, Fiona.
Look, what it's going to mean is more jobs for our community. It'll mean that more tourists can come in, spend time here, stay at our accommodation, go to restaurants and cafes, and that's really great for the community. But it also means there's a lot of other opportunities for different businesses to have innovative businesses here that they can then send freight out, send it overseas, but just base themselves here in this area. And for me, that all means jobs, fewer young people having to go away like I had to do. Great for our community.
So on the 4th of July, vote for Fiona Cotfoy as the Liberal candidate for Eden Monaro so we can get these projects on the ground and running. I need Fiona in my team so we can get these projects delivered here on the ground.
Authorised by ESMO.
And that's been authorised by the Liberal Party from Canberra. So it is wonderful to see the outback and all the regional areas coming into the focus as well. As we know, there's many parts of Australia which many times get left behind, and the big cities always get the attention, and the little and regional towns get left out. If you haven't seen all the regional towns or those little airports and those outback cities, you haven't seen Australia yet. So, you really need to get out there, well, of course, within the boundaries of the current restrictions. You can travel within those boundaries, and as the restrictions ease, which they will, then you will be allowed to go to all these beautiful places that Australia has. But right now, let's move on and look at some of the news coming out from overseas. So, as we mentioned before about Croatia, that Croatia has taken on this challenge and is reintroducing the quarantine after Djokovic's tennis tour mishap. And then let's look at what's happening in India. In India, as we know, that in Delhi there's been another outbreak, and so in India the armed forces have been called to help. While Novak Djokovic has come under fire for tournaments that helped organize, which have been seen quite a multiple people come in contact. Meanwhile, India's Home Ministry says that armed forces and personnel will be providing medical care and attention to coronavirus patients kept in railroad coaches in the Indian capital. So, when you look at India, the sheer size of India and then trying to manage everything there is, of course, very, very hard. It is not as easy. So India's capital of Delhi is struggling with the housing coronavirus patients and will use armed forces to help the treatment. India's Home Minister Amit Shah says that armed forces personnel will be providing medical care and attention to coronavirus patients kept in railroad coaches in the Indian capital. And as we have seen, there were some makeshift shelters that were made as well, very, very quickly put together to assist armed forces personnel have been detailed for providing medical care and the attention to COVID-19 patients housed in the railway coaches in Delhi, Mr. Shah said. Now, when you look at India, one of the arguments is, if you look at the ratio, if you look at the number of people and the ratio of the people who have been contracted the visit, and if you look at that formula, then India is not doing too bad. But if you just look at the CA numbers, it is getting to an alarming, alarming figure where it is getting to be a very high figure compared to other countries. Now to Italy. So in Italy, the Italian politician Matteo Salvini says migrants are a threat of bringing new cases to the country. Well, migrants or being any trouble, anyone coming into the country. 28 migrants who were rescued at sea have tested positive for coronavirus, Sicily's governor said. The positive test represent the largest cluster among many newly arrived migrants after a handful of positive cases were recorded in new arrivals in May in Greece. So there is that case, what do? We look at if we allow people to travel, that is sort of bound to happen, that, people will come in, and then once they do, with them will come the disease. Right now, drug testing trial begins on patients as well. So it is a breakthrough. So our US-based company says it has started the late-stage trial of its experimental muscle disorder drug on patients with coronavirus. Fulcrum Therapeutics said the drug Lomacipod is being used as high-risk adults who have tested positive to the infection. The company expects to report top-line data in the first quarter of 2021. So, it is still a fair bit of while before the results will come out, but at least the testings are happening. And as we had this morning also, the news from India as well, that there had been some claims, and the government had said unless and until everything's done and tested, that company is not allowed to put out any advertising material or any claims or any media releases until all the final tests are done, because they're looking at the credibility of the research and where and how everything was conducted as well. Acclaimed journalist dies after contracted COVID-19. So this is another very, very sad case. As we all know, that the Pulitzer Prize winning journalist Gregory Katz died at age 67. An acclaimed correspondent for the Associated Press in London, the IAP, as we know, who recently led the company's coverage of Brexit and the election of Boris Johnson, has died at the age 67. He had been ill in the recent months and had contracted coronavirus. His career over 4 decades took him across the globe, from Latin America to Africa, Asia to Russia, Middle East and Western Europe. May his soul rest in peace. He has been a forefront, always providing that wonderful news to everybody. All the coverage and everything that he did are there. Right now, let's go to Switzerland. And what is the Swiss government saying? The Swiss government is saying that they will pay for the coronavirus testing of citizens. The announcement came as it approved the launch of its proximity tracing app to prevent a resurgence of the virus as restrictions are relaxed. The government said it would take over the cost of virus and antibody testing and would simplify the system of testing. So that's a good news coming out of Switzerland, because as we know, the testing is very, very important. But how is it handled? If the government takes over the handling of that, that will always be a very, very welcome move. Now, as we know, many big events throughout the world have been cancelled, and everyone knows about the New York City's marathon, and it is now cancelled for the first time. The New York City Marathon, the world's largest, has been cancelled after organizers decided that the race posed too many risks and safety concerns. The New York City Marathon originally was planned to be held in November, which was shifted, has been cancelled. The second to the sixth World Marathon majors to be axed this year due to the coronavirus outbreak. So the second of the 6 World Marathon majors. Race organizers said the decision to cancel the world's largest marathon was made due to the coronavirus-related health and safety concern for the runners, spectators, volunteers and staff. everyone concerned. So cancelling this year's event is incredibly disappointing for everyone involved, but it has been clear that the cause was needed as following the direction of the health and safety perspective. So that's the news coming out of New York. As we know, New York has been very hard hit with the coronavirus and all the cases. Now, news in brief, very quickly, looking at ITO. So ITO this year is going to be looking at Australians who claim billions in rental deductions. So, you know, this year, JobKeeper has to be reported and so many things that have to be reported. And if you are going to be claiming those rental expenses, be very careful. Make sure that you have a very good real estate agent who has provided you with your financial year statements and who can always, and the agency can back up all your expenses. Then you talk to your accountant to find out what is claimable and only claim what is claimable. Certain portions of the expenses are not claimable if you have just made improvements to the property, but if they were needed and if that's increasing the rental of the property, then you are. But if it's just adding to the property as a capital gains, then you are not. So be very careful. So as ITO will this year be checking in great details about those cases. And the case in Pakistan, beyond comparison, the Pakistan Crest pilots distracted by coronavirus raised wheels again, the minister says. So if you look at that crash, it is just beyond comparison. And Djokovic's father defends his case about what happened and that he should be held responsible. But there are organizers involved in it as well. So where do we draw the line? So it is very, very important that we do all those right things out there. Well, right now let's take a very short commercial break and we'll continue on.
1 in 2 women have experienced sexual harassment in Australia.
Together.
Together.
Together we will end men's violence against women and children in our community.
Host an event. Involve your community. White Ribbon Day, Friday 20th November.
And right now, a very quick word from our sponsor.
ग्लोबनेट रियलिटी 1989 से लेकर अब तक का विश्वसनीय और माननीय ब्रिस्बेन का रियल एस्टेट एजेंट है। उषा चंद्रा, जो कि ग्लोबनेट की डायरेक्टर है, अपने ग्राहकों को ईमानदार और एथिक सर्विसेज देती हैं। अगर आप ब्रिस्बेन की प्रॉपर्टी में पूंजी लगाना चाहते हैं और आप चाहते हैं कि आपकी प्रॉपर्टी को प्रोफेशनली मैनेज किया जाए, तो आप आज ही कांटेक्ट कीजिए उषा चंद्रा को। लैंडलाइन नंबर है 38654466 और मोबाइल नंबर है 0419775416। और आप प्रॉपर्टी की अधिक जानकारी और करंट अपडेट्स के लिए हमारी वेबसाइट पे लॉगिन कर सकते हैं। हमारी वेबसाइट है www.globnetreality.com.au। ग्लोबनेट रियलिटी आपका अपना लोकल रियल एस्टेट एजेंट है। हमारा पता है ग्लोबनेट रियलिटी, शॉप नंबर 5, 2281 Sandgate Road, Bundall, Queensland. Globenet Reality. Real estate is our world.
And it really is the world. And right now we'll go in this segment, in the ending segment, we will look at the news overseas. As we know, Russia always holds its Victory Day, but this year, as many things have been cancelled worldwide, what's going to happen there? Are they going to go ahead with that or not? Let's have a quick look.
Russia is holding its biggest public holiday, the Victory Parade, marking the 75th anniversary of the defeat of Nazi Germany in World War II, despite a growing number of coronavirus infections. The parade is usually held on May the 9th, but was delayed because of the pandemic. This year's event holds special significance for President Putin because in a week's time, Russia will hold a constitutional vote which could allow him to stay in power until 2036. Our correspondent Steve Rosenberg has been watching the event in Red Square.
Hurrah! It was the parade the Kremlin had been determined to stage. On Red Square, Russian military might marking 75 years since the defeat of Nazi Germany. It had been postponed once due to the pandemic, but the president had pledged the parade would go ahead when possible. to honour Russia's contribution in World War II.
We will always remember that Nazism was crushed by the Soviet people, by millions of people of different ethnicities from all republics of the Soviet Union.
No masks for the military and no social distancing. But the Kremlin insists this was safe.
Vladimir Putin's decision to push ahead with this parade now is a controversial one. The Kremlin leader claims that the coronavirus is in retreat, but it's not beaten. The city of Moscow alone is registering around 1,000 new COVID cases every day.
So why did Vladimir Putin decide the military show must go on? Partly because Russia's victory in World War II has become a cornerstone of the country's national idea. But more crucially, the president is hoping the parade boosts his popularity ahead of a referendum on extending his rule. Voting starts tomorrow. War veteran Nikolai Yarko wasn't worried. We'll beat the virus, he says, just like we defeated the Nazis. It's fighting talk like that the Kremlin is keen to encourage.
So that's the news coming out of Russia. Yes, of course, despite the coronavirus and everything, the Victory Day parade, and everything just took place, and quite similar to the Republic Day the parade in India. You know, when you see those jets flying over information, so all that did take place there. And now, a very quick look at America, and let's see what President Trump has been up to. You know, he's really has brought about quite a large number of people despite the coronavirus cases, as we know. So let's take a quick look at U.S.
Donald Trump has taken his campaign to Arizona, where he toured the border wall and addressed a church packed with students. Tim Arvia reports the president played down the virus to supporters in Phoenix as cases surge across the state.
Donald Trump signs a plaque on the border wall in Arizona to mark 320 kilometres of construction, before addressing thousands of young Republicans packed into a megachurch on the state's worst day for coronavirus so far. 3,500 new cases and 42 deaths.
I could build numerous walls with all the money I have.
Attendees ignoring advice from the nation's top infectious diseases doctor.
Plan A, don't go in a crowd. Plan B, if you do, make sure you wear a mask.
The president was again grilled over his apparent joke about slowing down coronavirus testing.
Were you just kidding, or do you have a plan to slow down testing?
I don't kid. Testing is a double-edged sword. In one way, it tells you you have cases. In another way, you find out where the cases are.
Dr. Anthony Fauci insists there will be more testing as case numbers spike in half of US states, with 80,000 detected across Texas, Florida and California over the past.
So as we heard, the testing will continue in America, and the president wasn't too impressed with that question about whether he had a plan or not about testing and what his views were on those testings. Right now, let's take a quick look at a news or report from Indo-China border and the conflict that's taking place there.
Now, India's military deployed along the de facto border with China has been given quote-unquote full freedom to give a befitting reply to any Chinese misadventurism. The government sources have said that Indian Defence Minister Rajnath Singh met with the top military brass, and the meeting was attended also by the Indian Chief of Defence Staff, General Bipin Rawat. Now, Army Chief General M.M. Naravane, Navy Chief Admiral Karambir Singh and Air Chief Marshal R.K.S. Bhaduria, India has already mobilized fighter jets, its best fighter jets, and has sent additional army troops to forward locations along the border with China. Now, in Sunday's meeting, the Indian Defence Minister told the top military commanders to maintain a very strict vigil on Chinese activities at the land border, in airspace and also in the strategic sea lanes. Now, following the Galwan incident, military sources have said that Indian troops will no longer be bound by the long-held practice of not using firearms in a potential face-off with the Chinese. Now, the two armies had mutually decided not to resort to use firearms during face-off, in sync with the provisions of the two agreements on the border management. This had been done to...
So that's the long-standing border conflict in Leh Ladakh, the district of, on the line of control there as well. Well, we have to blame a little bit onto the British as well, because they never made a very, very clear distinction when they left. But such is the case, and I know that worldwide there have been talks between the two countries, and hopefully there will be some resolution that comes out. But I know India's always had the big challenge of always protecting its borders all along, not only with China, with other neighboring countries as well. Right now, let's take a very quick look at the upcoming events before we close off for today. Online Hindu Dharma classes for children, for Bal Sanskar Kendra, Breathe Your Way with Art of Living Foundation, and Comeback Conference. I'll talk to you a little bit about this because tomorrow's program is dedicated to this group, and it will be a live interview right here on this. So the Christian Leaders Fellowship, CLF, which is a wonderful organization. Please do log on and have a listen to this wonderful, wonderful program. And as I said, tomorrow, Reverend Kim Seong-Hum is coming on our show. BSK 8th Annual Cup, contact Satish Rajendran. Gurudwara programs have begun. Langars have been started again. And the food and grocery pickup service from Brisbane Sikh Temple is happening. COVID-19 Hindu Helpline still happening at the moment. And of course, all the programs of Brisbane chapter of Vedanta Centre of Sydney. You can log on to our website as well. You can get the updated information there. Sahyog Brisbane is all happening. And this message here from Hindu Ahelya Sangam, the cafeteria is open from Sunday, June 14, but the management has taken on a decision that it will open, but of course it will be subject to all the conditions that are imposed. So it is good to see that it is open and it is happening. So please check the details before you go. Standby, which is a support after suicide, it is a counseling service helped by Uniting Church, and the Young Sikh Professional Network's online CV checks and job positive parenting by our Vietnamese community in Australia and the Queensland chapter. Once again, the Hindu Dharma classes for children and there. So, ladies and gentlemen, that has been the show for today. It's been wonderful having your company once again. It's so good to see you all the time. It is very, very good. All the feedback that we're getting, thank you very much for those feedbacks. Whatever it may be, because there is always room for improvements, and we will only be able to improve based upon the feedback we get from you. And don't forget that what we do from here, our broadcast is going to air live. So, whenever you do a live program and not a pre-recorded program, you know that there could be certain glitches or things, because there's so much that we rely upon. We rely on the internet and all the technologies and everything to work. Sometimes there's a bit of distortion in sound, or some of the scenes may freeze and not queue up. So all these are challenges that we have to deal with, but that's okay. We live to learn, we'll deal with that. But based upon your feedback is what the improvements we will make. So once again, thank you so much for being with us. Until tomorrow, it's goodbye from me.